Let's be friends.
Have you not?
Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Ambassador Wing and another Ultra Retro Rewind. And today I've got my good friend here, Ace Mowick, and we are discussing a pair of George Lucas's feature films before he got into Star Wars, before he became known as the man who created that galaxy far, far away. And today we're going to be discussing THX-1138 and American Graffitti. And personally, if you are a fan of George Lucas's work, good, bad, or otherwise, these are two films you really should check out. I mean, he has done other things beyond Star Wars, obviously. And as a fan of George Lucas, like me and Ace are, we're like, we got to talk about these movies because I don't think enough people talk about these movies. I mean, yeah, everybody talks about Star Wars. We talk about the original trilogy. We talk about the prequels, yada, yada, yada. But these movies really have a lot in them and have some great performances, some really good solid writing, good story, have some good humor, especially with the American Graffitti, and of course has a very lengthy cameo by a very young director before he got into the director's booth. Of course, me and Mr. Ron Howard, or as he's called in the credits, Ronnie Howard, back when he was still known as Ronnie Howard from his days on the Andy Griffith Show. So, Ace, my friend, good to have you on. It's been a minute. So, and I want to give credit where credit was due. This was actually Ace's idea to do this review, and I have to admit it's been a minute since I've watched either one of these movies. I got a chance to pick up the director's cut of THX-1138, and it was, I've seen it before on streaming and so on, but it was an interesting experience watching it again, both with and without the director's commentary. I will say the director's commentary with George Lucas and the other guy, Murch. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. I want to say Albert Murch, maybe. Walter Murch. Thank you. So, Ace, let's jump in. THX-1138, and then we'll go on to American Graffitti from there. So,
yes, and just a heads up, I hear it's raining outside. I don't know if there will be lightning or thunder, so there's an off chance I might get disconnected, just forewarning.
That's fine.
But THX, I remember it was obviously first heard about it in Star Wars featurettes, talking about like how he went from his early film school days up into, THX and American Graffitti into Star Wars. And I always kind of thought, oh, that might be interesting to see a pre-Star Wars science fiction movie by George Lucas. And even hearing him sort of describe it with those science fiction interviews with James Cameron, and he mentions how if you watch THX, George Lucas is less the spaceship guy, and he's more kind of like a George Orwell type of guy. And if you watch this movie, it is absolutely true. I mean, with all honesty, I never got to watch this movie till the last couple years of my life. And frankly, I'm glad I did, because American Graffitti, I saw in my teen years, loved it, but THX I did not see until the last couple years, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think I would not have been able to comprehend it, because as George Lucas has described it in interviews, it's more of a tone poem type of movie where the story isn't necessarily as important as the visual metaphor. It's quote unquote artsy fartsy. That is what he describes. He said in an interview he's paraphrased Coppola after the movie didn't do well financially at the box office, that why are you doing all this artsy fartsy stuff? Why don't you do a comedy? I dare you to make a comedy. And that became American Graffitti. But we're sticking to THX.
At least for the moment, yes. I myself, I have seen this movie once or twice when we had HBO Max or anything. It's not that it wasn't in the budget to keep it, but I saw it as like, ooh, I remember this vaguely. I remember them talking about it, and of course I remember all the promos for THX on every movie that was put on VHS and DVD back in the 90s and early 2000s. I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. Okay, I'm gonna go check this out. And I'm like, okay, Robert Duvall, Donald Pleasance, I know those two. I like them. I will definitely give this a shot. And what you brought up just a minute ago, Ace, is true. It is very much a tone poem. The thing that Lucas brought up in the director's commentary is also true. It's a story told 3 times over, but told from different points of view. And what Lucas brought up is in the first part, it's told in thirds, as he said, when him and Walter Murch were talking about. The first part is where THX, or THX, as he's referred to by some of the other characters, is still under heavy sedation from the state, is the way it's framed here. The second part is when his partner, La, and that's literally her name, La, and it's a prefix number after that, but I can't remember her prefix number, but La changes out his medications, and he starts to become unsedated and starts to realize, I've cut myself off from human emotion. I don't like that. And then in the third part is where he finally breaks completely free and decides to leave the city. And you have you could call it a somewhat conventional chase scene, a prolonged chase scene. That is true. But I think there's a lot more within it. But I don't want to just glaze over it because there's a lot in all 3 of these parts here. So, Ace, let's kind of tackle this the way the man, I think, intended us to. Let's talk about the first third where THX, or THX, is still under sedation. He's still a puppet, essentially, of the state. What did you think of that particular part? And also of the cast and everything. I want to discuss the cast as well, but go ahead.
Well, in terms of the cast, just to say it while it's on the edge of my tongue, I've only seen a handful of Robert Duvall movies, and obviously them being the Godfather movies, and his role in, what was it? It was remade by the True Grit, the original True Grit, where he was actually the villain of the head of the gang that was responsible. And I thought he's definitely trying to work with what George Lucas is giving him as direction. And some people say George is not an actor's director, and understandable, but I think Duvall did convey the emotions that George wanted him to convey, which is kind of this person who's very, what is the word I'm looking for, repressed, and it's not of his own accord, and it's not because of some subconscious thing like, oh, I'm worthless. It's because he's literally a drug zombie because of the state, which is it's not in an authoritarian state. It's a state that's basically, the people are prisoners of their own will, in a manner of speaking, because they keep taking their medicine, and it's basically enforced by bureaucracy and the machines that they build. And
the robots, the cops,
the droids, as George said in the commentary. And I just, when you first see him going into that confession booth, you just get this sense of this guy's like, even before he changes his medicine, that there's some level of awareness of the toll it takes him, because you can just get the sense of depression. It's like, oh God, I don't know, sort of thing. And his work, from what I understand, can understand from the movie, maybe I'm skipping ahead into the second act, but
no, you're still in the first act, because we do see him at his job where he's constructing the robots that essentially keep him and the rest of the people in the city captive.
Yeah, and when they state that, they don't actually state it in terms of like spoon feeding it to you, but they basically suggest that another reason he wants to kind of take the drugs, or keeps taking the drugs, is he needs them to perform his work. It keeps him sedated, so that it's a very anxious job he's working with, basically building these robots, and also their fuel source, which is radioactive based, and these little fuselage rods, or whatever you want to call them. I'm not a, I have no knowledge of nuclear physics.
I would essentially call it a miniaturized nuclear isotope.
That's probably
speaking, a miniaturized nuclear battery of some sort. I would describe it as.
Yeah, so you can see like how, imagine an average person doing that. They would probably need medicine to help them focus, like how some people who say are ADHD think might need to take medicine to help them focus on something. And just for the record, that's, I say might, because every person with ADHD is different, and that's not me causing disrespect. I'm autistic with ADHD, for the record, folks.
Yeah. So no, hey, I don't think anybody's gonna be offended by any means.
I just have to make it clear.
No, I know, I understand. It's fine. Yeah, the interesting thing that I picked up on was, okay, if you notice, La is actually one of the monitors, and she has this really anxious or depressed look on her face when she's monitoring all these other people. And then you see, I think it's Donald Pleasant's character, Sen.
Sen, I think it's pronounced
Sen,
S-E-N.
S-E-N, but I think it is pronounced Sin, but I could be wrong. He almost seems to enjoy being a monitor. He enjoys the whole surveillance aspect of his job, of his work, of the society, in a manner of speaking. But his character goes on a very interesting journey between from the start to the end of the movie as well. But focusing on the drug aspect, and they have essentially monopolized and stripped down the idea of organized religion to almost a form of brainwashing, in a manner of speaking. Because you go to this confessional and you're sitting in front of this video monitor, and all you hear is an automated voice, and it's recording everything you say. And what you see is a image of Christ. And instead of it actually giving you any real guidance, it just reinforces the doctrine of the state. And at one point, you see THX or THX go into, we assume, some sort of store, and he buys this simple red cube or octagon or whatever. But then when he gets home, he just, I think it's love, puts it in a disintegrator, and it goes poof. The thing that Lucas also commented on was the idea that commerce or capitalism or any type of materialistic compulsion that people have is simply another form of control by the state.
Yeah, and what's funny is apparently he was commenting on the consumer culture of the early 60s, which could still be a reflection of the late 50s and whatnot with the consumer culture, but early 60s, because that's when he would remember more so, because that was when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's funny how you think, oh, it's commenting on that time, and the movie is described as not being a movie from the future. I mean, it's not a movie about the future, it's a movie from the future. And in a way, it's still relevant today, because people will buy stupid crap on Amazon that they don't even need, or Temu or something like that. And, a decade or two ago, we had malls, and that went all the way back to the 80s and so forth. And like George Carlin once commented, the American pastime, buying things. Just for the sake of buying things.
Yeah, really. So, well, I don't think Lucas is necessarily saying that capitalism or anything like that is necessarily inherently a bad thing, but he is commenting on the fact that when it's taken to this degree, where it's used as a form of control by the state or the system, or whatever way you want to frame it, then yeah, consumerism capitalism is bad. It can be turned into a tool that's used to control the masses. That's not a good thing, obviously. So, the other thing I found interesting, and we're all adults here, I think we can comment on this, is the fact that any form of physical contact or any form of sexual gratification outside of the self is completely and utterly forbidden. It's called perversion, essentially. The fact that two people want to engage in sexual intercourse is banned by the state, which kind of reminds me of another movie that I personally love. I think you would too. That, of course, being Demolition Man, where they where the White Castle Pope, Raymond Cocteau, has told people you can't kiss, you can't make out, you can't even get naked and do the horizontal bop. You have to use a virtual helmet to do it. You have to use a VR unit to do it. And I'm like, and Sylvester Stallone's character is like, well, gee, where's the fun in that? He's like, I was a great kisser. I can't kiss. And then he goes in to kiss Sandra Bullock's character, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, breaking the law. She's like, get out of my apartment now. And then later on, she's like, come here, you handsome beast, kiss me. But anyway, in this movie, if you're caught having sex, you get arrested. And that to me is that's another severe form of repression, because you keep people sedated and you tell them they can't have any type of sex whatsoever. Yeah, that's an issue. Because you can wind a watch only so tightly until it eventually is going to break a spring.
And I'm curious on, based on the commentary of, I wonder if that idea is kind of commentating on how at the time that on the hippie culture was kind of doing the whole free love movement, but there were some people that were against that if they were being overly restrictive of saying, no, you can't do this sort of thing. And not to say the hippies were right, because there's a lot of them easily betrayed their principles when it became convenient for them. So they not much moral high ground for them. But what's funny is once again, something commenting on something at the time came true in the future, because earlier in the movie, THX is watching basically a porno holographic of a naked woman dancing while a machine is, pleasuring him. So it's not done person on person, and
you can't even do it yourself. Where's the fun in that?
And I think that's, once again, like nowadays, the hologram is like OnlyFans or pornography or whatever people want to do. And the machine stroking is all these sex bots or whatever that have been gaining traction the last couple of years. And I just think, wow, George predicted the future in a manner.
In a manner speaking, you're right. He did.
It could be me reading too much into it. And also,
no, I don't think you are.
Another thing he said in the commentary is because you can't do it with another person, it's devoid of love. It's because it's devoid of intimacy. Much like people nowadays, like even if they do hook up, it's just because just for pleasure. It's devoid of any actual intimate
emotion.
Love.
Yeah, exactly.
And later in the movie, we see test tube babies in jars, and we have that nowadays. We have that so people can procreate. Sometimes the circumstances because they can't have kids because of their own. But so
that's another matter entirely. But I get what I honestly do get what you're saying. And I guess we can kind of move into. I mean, because is there anything else in the first act that you want to discuss? The first third, or was that? If there's anything we can want to come back to, obviously we can, but
let me look at my notes just to make sure.
Okay.
Because some of this I can save the next part. The job, since this leads into the second act, his job, like we already mentioned how he handles this radioactive stuff. The thing that really, other than the sexual perversion, is when the system realizes, he's not taking his medicine, and it's kind of making him not function right on the job, and it's a very menial job. So they decide, oh, we're gonna put a mind block on him, and he basically freezes in positions, and work starts going hectic. And
Yeah.
I just found it funny how the bureaucrats are trying to do their job to discipline, but they end up making things worse.
Worse.
Happens a
and
lot in the real world.
yeah, well, there's even, I think it's in the first, it's towards the beginning or in the beginning of the movie. There's actually an accident in one of the other building facilities or the manufacturing facilities. They have an explosion take place, and there's just an announcement. There's been an accident, but you all are okay. You're actually haven't as many accidents as this other section. Keep doing it. Keep up production, keep up supply, just move forward, don't even worry about it. So it also shows a devaluation of human life, if you think about it, because they're
just so
not allowed to
desensitized.
they're not allowed to pause and go, oh crap, several people have died. They're just like, nope, just keep working, it's all right, we're cleaning it up now, don't even worry about it, there's no chance of radiation exposure or leak or anything, just keep going.
And how
And
they say,
I don't want to make that sound flippantly or anything, but it's how the society in the movie functions.
and not to mention how when they're announcing that, like they said, we lost the one where they had the accident, the explosion, or whatever it was. They're like, oh, we lost 234 compared to our 90 we lost last time. Keep up the good work. No one even stops to think for a second. They're all just keep doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that work without any form of personal pride or purpose or anything, that too is it's rather disturbing. I mean, several people died and they don't even skip a beat. But moving on and everything. Obviously, we see Lud changing out THX's medications in his meal packet, or whatever you want to call whatever his non-microwavable TV dinner, a tray of cubes or whatever you want to call it, and he takes his pills and he finally realizes, holy crap, something's wrong with me, because he's like, I'm wanting to bonk my roommate. He's like, I'm having issues here. And what does he end up doing? They end up having sex. And go ahead.
Oh, and just seeing him kind of come out of his drug zombie stupor, just the simple act of like maybe touching her face, and just kissing, like just seems like it's a new great experience for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because they don't kiss the way normal people would kiss. It's like they've never kissed before, and they're just trying now to figure out, well, how the heck do I kiss this person? And it's rather rigid in a manner of speaking. I mean, I'm guessing the other part isn't so much so. They figure out, oh, this goes in here, and well, let nature take its course, essentially. But I have to admit that whole sequence and everything where Thex and La are having sex, you watch them and you're like, geez, these aren't just virgins. These are people that have never experienced even a moment's form of personal intimacy with another human being, for Pete's sake. And you feel for them, but at the same time, well, crap, they're probably being watched. And Luz says, well, we could always run, and he's like, it doesn't register with THX about, well, why don't we just run, get the hell out of here? So, but then of course there's the entire trial part. But go ahead, Ace.
Well, I think it's also because it reminds me of, well, not reminds. It's like he's been lobotomized partly for the majority of his life, and then once he's off the pills, he's coming out of a drug fueled stupor, fog, and now he's almost like a hormonal teenager. Like, what's this new thing I'm experiencing? I don't really know what to do with it. It's kind of exciting, but anxiety inducing at the same time. And it
Mm-hmm.
creates a level of uncertainty. Like when she says, like, we could just leave, and he's kind of unsure about that because it's going into the unknown, which, it has this recurring theme George Lucas liked using in his first three movies, this, American Graffiti, and Star Wars A New Hope, is the theme of leaving home, going into the unknown.
Yeah. And in all three movies, it's kind of done in different you want to say, for lack of a better word, formats. Because with THX, it's the main character escaping from this repressive, emotionally, mentally, psychologically repressive state, and being able to actually live on his own and be able to do and think for himself, rather than being told where to go, what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and everything else in between. And in American Graffiti, it's a little more lighthearted, for American speaking. It's a bunch of kids that are getting ready to graduate from high school and go to college or go out into the world and start their lives and so on. And we'll get to that when we get to American Graffiti, obviously. So, but the interesting thing with the middle chapter of this is I guess you could say this is the more disturbing part of the movie, because we see what happens to Thex, at least, not so much to La, after they do have sex. She gets captured, we assume off screen and everything, because she gets a request from Donald Pleasant's character, Sen, to go to his quarters because she's getting a schedule change or something, and Thex is like, no, this doesn't seem right. This is supposed to come from a different department, and it's not supposed to come from him. And she's like, he's a G34 or something, and I guess we're supposed to infer that he is a high-ranking official or something above either one of them, wherever the case may be. But that's the last time, I think. No, we see her one more time, and that's anything. It's in the whiteout prison, but we'll get to that in time. But we see Thex being put on trial, and you're thinking he's being put on trial for having sex with a woman. Jesus, this is a society that really has become just not power hungry, but insanely so. So, anyway, go ahead, Ace.
And the trial is very, very much a mock court. It's just kind of a formality. Like they're gonna throw him in there regardless. Mm-hmm. And and we can even, what is I can't think of the words I was looking for. Like how all the language that's being used by the people in the court, you know, it's intentionally jargon. You don't understand it because basically they're just saying nonsense and throw them in jail, because that's what it is. It's just a mock court. So they're saying, of course, in a mock court, they're saying nonsense.
Yeah, because they're going to do with him what they want to do with him one way or another. This is just for show, essentially. It's all just for show. It's to give the illusion of some form of fairness or choice or whatever the case may be from the state. But ultimately, they've already decided what they're going to do with him, and they try reprogram. They put him through all these different tests. They probe him, they prod him, they scan him, and then they have 3 of those robot cops or robot guards use extra long stun batons to goad him back into submission. And then we see another section where you see a couple of guys talking, and they're using some sort of auditory control on him to make him compliant before they ship him off to the other part of the whiteout prison or whiteout jail.
I think it's known as the Abyss or something.
Yeah, something like that. So, your thoughts on what of those two sections? What did you think? What did you think of that, Ace?
Well, when he's first in the Abyss prison, like how he's at first being, controlled, like you said, how he's kind of like convulsing, like out of control and freaking out. And as they're kind of just casually talking over, it's like, oh no, you flipped the wrong switch here, do this. Like how they're just nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
This might be me reading a little too much into it. This is not something that George, I think, was commenting on. But I see how those guys just chatting. It's like, oh no, you're pressing the wrong thing. Here, do this instead. Kind of reminds me of like how nowadays if two friends are gaming and it's like, no, that's not the accelerate button. This is the accelerate button. And this is how you hit the brakes, or you do this, that, and the other end. And then, oh no, the character fell off the cliff or something like that. Just that kind of thing of you're trying to get the hang of the controls while it's affecting something else. I mean, the thing you're in control of, it's severely affecting them and it's unpleasant, but it's nothing to you, essentially. That's what it reminded me of. Nothing George Lucas could have predicted, I would say. And definitely nothing he intended.
I think...
At least in the video game part.
Yeah. I think there is some truth in what you're saying, because it seems like the two men that are using the controls to interact with THX in the whiteout prison or the Abyss, it does very much seem like they're just kind of testing this piece of machinery out. They're more so than anything else. They see him as an opportunity to test out this new toy and see exactly what it does, and exactly how much pain or anxiety or whatever they can inflict on another person. Now, obviously, after all of this, he gets shipped off to the Abyss or the whiteout prison, and we see a bunch of the other inmates, but we realize this is a prison with absolutely no bars. No bars whatsoever, no guards either. I mean, the only time you see a guard is when they're bringing in another inmate.
Or taking one out.
Or taking one out, obviously. And we see Donald Pleasant's character Sin once again, and he is talking with THX, and he's talking with the other inmates about revolution, breaking down the system, escaping, trying to figure out a way for everybody to get out, not just him and THX or THX, because he realizes the two of them could have the best chance of doing so. And ultimately, and obviously they do eventually, THX is like, I'm leaving. I'm not staying here. I'm not staying with these defectives and these delusional people. He's like, I'm going to try and get out of here. I'm leaving. And Sin kind of latches on to him because, well, he has no other idea than to do this to see what ultimately would happen. And this part of the movie, I think, is one of the more surreal parts. I think it's one of the parts that most people have a harder time. I don't want to say, I think comprehending might be the appropriate word, not to say that the people that watch this and don't get it are dumb, but it is very surreal, is very, well, as Coppola and Lucas both said, it's very artsy-fartsy. But there is, I think, some truth in it, because in this third part, THX is no longer necessarily under the control of the state, or he finally realizes, hey, they're not watching me. They're not watching us. I'm going to see if I can get out of here. I'm going to see if I can finally escape. And then he's got this latch on who decides, well, if you're leaving, I'm leaving too. And then he makes this grand speech, because Sin is, if nothing, a very poor showman, but a showman nonetheless. He's like, we're going to try and see if we can get out, and if so, we'll come back for the rest of you. But obviously that doesn't happen. And we do see that in one part, La is brought into the prison herself, and her and Thex have a short reunion. But then the two of them do the thing that they have sex again, and she realizes that she's pregnant, and the robot guards come and take her away. So, any of that you want to comment on, Ace?
Well, first thing I want to comment on is the actual moment. Like, it's after La and THX have sex the second time, and THX is with Sen and the other prisoners. For those of you that are fans, there's actually a little camp. I wouldn't call it cameo, but a small part in there played by the late Sid Haig, who a lot of you may know as Captain Spaulding from Rob Zombie's House of Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects. And
they've never seen it.
Okay, just thought I'd mention that for. And what's interesting about the scene is that Sen is kind of making these grandstanding speeches about, oh, we will escape and whatnot, but THX is sitting there the whole time, just kind of, I wouldn't say brooding, but he's just kind of taking it all in. He's just kind of thinking to himself of what he's going to do, and Sen's just talking about leaving and getting out of here, revolution and whatnot. And THX doesn't say anything. He just gets up and leaves. And Sen's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm leaving." Like Sen doesn't actually do something until he's given incentive by somebody else doing. He's like, "See, this is what the plan we had," sort of thing. And, which I think George said in the commentary that Sen's speeches were kind of modeled after Richard Nixon speeches or something like that. And I'm not someone who just looks up Richard Nixon speeches just to be like, oh yeah, this is exactly what George. So I'll take his word for it.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing: you've got two very good, lesser known. Well, I don't want to say lesser known, but two actors who aren't maybe as prominent as maybe they should be. I mean, you've got Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasance in this movie, and I have to admit, the two of them play very well off of each other. But the interesting thing about this section is Robert Duvall really carries the weight of this movie on his back, and I'd say he does a very compelling job. I mean, he's playing a guy who is going through various stages of reawakening to his humanity. And that's in a lot of way, I think, the kind of the focus or the message behind this movie. People who have essentially lost their humanity, even though they're still human, but one person finally reawakens to his humanity with the help of another who has done the same thing. And you see, I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit. You see at the start of the movie in their apartment that La seems to have feelings for THX, but she never expresses them because obviously they're being monitored by audio and video surveillance. But once he awakens to that, he obviously feels the same way. And the main reason for THX to want to get out is to find La and help her escape as well. Now, I don't want to jump forward too far, but throughout the course of Sen and THX going through the white abyss, they come across another person. But this guy claims that he is not actually a person. He is a hologram who has gained sentience, essentially. And you have to think to yourself, okay, is this guy just nuts? Is he so far off his meds that he is somewhat bonkers? But at the same time, there's a reveal later on in the movie where there's a car crash, but there ain't no body. So you have to ask yourself the question, was this guy really there?
It's a valid question, and the hologram character is, if you, according to the comments, are Sen and Thex, they're wandering this abyss, like how the heck do we get out of here? They feel like they're going in circles until they come across the hologram, and they ask him like, "Hey, do you know the way out?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it's over there." He literally points behind. They're like, "We just came from there." He's like, "Oh no, it's like right there." And then he literally leads him over to the door out of the abyss, and it touches upon. He's in a way a progenitor, if that's the proper word, or precursor to Jar Jar Binks, with this fantasy type character where it's like something that you would not expect to be helpful. It's something that's kind of acts a little silly in a manner, or nonchalant compared to the other people. But but despite this, he actually has something that is very helpful for you to get out of the situation you're stuck in. Like he helps Thex and Sen get out of the abyss, much like how Jar Jar Binks helped Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan get to Gungan City or come across the Chosen One, for example.
And manner speaking, yeah, I would agree with that and everything. And to quote the man, it's poetry. It rhymes, even if he doesn't realize that it does at times. So yeah, I would agree with you. He is kind of a precursor to Jar Jar Binks, although I think this version was better executed. So,
yeah,
but
just a different performance, and we can see George loves having callbacks to his earlier movies in some form. I mean, even American Graffiti. Not get ahead of myself. Like even one character's license plate was THX-1138.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually watched these in reverse order. I watched American Graffiti first, and then I watched THX, and I saw that. I was like, "Oh, you sneaky little guy." So, but yeah.
And also watching. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ace. It's fine.
Oh, and when you watch THX, you realize that, like I said, George repurposes certain things, like some of the imagery, like a city where it's all underground, like there's no sunlight, and it's a very white, clean, sterile environment. That's Camino from Attack of the Clones, and how the people are like they're stripped of identity, shaved heads, white uniforms, the clones, and like
Clones.
a mechanized police force. It could be the droids in the prequel trilogy.
Well, and even if you listen to the voice of those droids in THX, they do have a different. Certain ones have a different vocal tone. Their voice sounds different. So even to that aspect, especially in the Clone Wars animated series, the different droids do sound somewhat different from one another. So yeah, there is parallels here, obviously. So, but obviously the three of them, they get out of the white abyss, and they find this doorway, and then they just get plunged into this mass of humanity that just has absolutely no regard for them. And you almost think, well, good grief, they're just going to get trampled. But amazingly, they find their way out of there, except Sen gets separated from Thex, and we'll call the other guy Hall for, hologram and everything, just for short, and everything for our own use here. And there's this, I have to admit, the chase in this movie, I think, is one of the most revealing. And I think, honestly, when I say revealing, it really shows the desperation of Thex and Hall, and even to a degree Sen, even though Sen does end up getting recaptured, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen to him per se, but we have an idea. Either he's going to get liquidated or he's going to get sent back to the White Abyss. But Thex and Hall are doing everything in their power to try and circumnavigate this complete and total surveillance-centered society, and trying out with these robot guards. And amazingly, they succeed even though there is a reveal that unfortunately Love was liquidated because
And
we see, we see. But any comments you want to make on that part, Ace?
well, once again, the fetuses in the jars obviously repurposed
Mhm.
into the clone centers on Camino. And when you mentioned like how when they get in the crowd and lost, it this is
Mhm.
might be off from what was intended, but we can see how the Sen and Thex get separated from each other in this
Mhm.
crowd, and it just kind of goes to show that people are trying to escape. They can get lost in the crowd along the
Mhm.
way, and it separates because like I said earlier, he's the one that makes the motion of like I'm leaving, and he decides to leave, and he manages to fight the crowd enough to help find Hall and help lead him out. But Sen just gets easily lost, and he tries to fight against it to reconnect with the THX, and he can't do it. And he apparently, like, the commentary helped me with this. Like, as they're both, trying to get away, like THX is heading more towards the outer part of the city, towards
Mhm.
the outskirts, and Sen is going more towards the inside of it. And the deeper he
Mhm.
goes, he realizes, oh, there's nothing here. He sees like just a filthy area, like in beneath
Mhm.
the tunnels and whatnot. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't like this. I'm going back to safety. He flees back to comfort in a sense.
Yeah. And there is one other section there, or one other scene there with Sen, where he comes across essentially a studio, a recording studio with the backdrop of the screen of the picture with the picture of Christ. And one of the priests actually comes across him, and the priest is like, "You shouldn't be here. If you need to go talk to Om or OOM, you can go to one of the booths." And Sen is like, "I don't want to go to one of the booths." He's like, "I'm here. I'll just wait here." And the priest is like, "Well, I've got to turn you in." And Sen, I think, kills or incapacitates him, one or the other, and then he's back on the run again. But unfortunately, he doesn't necessarily have the survival skill, in a manner of speaking, that Thex does. Or not survival instinct, I think is the better word. Excuse me.
Yeah, valid point.
So, which of course leads to Thex and Hall getting to the garage on the outskirts of the city, and I I have to admit, I love the car. I love Thex's car, and you see a bit of Lucas's appreciation for automobiles, even if it's in the far distant future, because he's got a really nice souped up hot rod, very futuristic hot rod, and he's lapping he's lapping the two robot guards on the motorcycles. But you have to admit, I'm gonna say this just because I love this movie this much. Those motorcycles that the robot guards are on reminds me of something straight out of Tron. I'm not gonna lie.
I thought the same actually.
Okay, all right, that wasn't just me.
Yeah. And what's interesting is those obviously George loves racing because his goals
Mhm.
before film school or even college were to be a mechanic and race cars and
Mhm.
whatnot. But
Mhm.
those the cars they use in the movie, those were actual race cars, and they just added a few bells and whistles on there to make them look a little more futuristic and whatnot, like the sirens and so forth. I think wow,
Yeah.
those were actual race cars. I couldn't say about the motorcycles other than when they shot the chase. According to the commentary, they were shooting it in one tunnel in San Francisco,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
they could only do it shut down the tunnel late at night, and the loudness of the racing woke up the neighbors, and they called and complained they got shut down a couple times, and apparently when there was the stuntmen who played the droids on the motorcycles, there was a moment where he's the last one, like the other one crashes or whatever,
Mhm.
falls off his
Yeah.
bike, and then the other one crashes later on. Apparently when they were shooting that shot, he was going a little faster. He was trying to be a little bit, have a little more spectacle for it, and he overshot, and he was supposed to just fall off his bike as he
And
crashed.
he hit Thex's
Yeah,
car. Yeah.
yeah, he went flying, and surprisingly the
They
stuntman was not hurt.
Yeah, amazingly, that stuntman was not hurt, and I think Lucas or one of the other producers was like, "What the hell were you trying to do?" And they were holding their breath for a minute there to wait and see if the guy was actually going to move, and thankfully he did. He came back. He came out of it unscathed. Thank heavens.
Mm.
Really, I mean that, because that'd be the last thing that you want a first time director to happen on your production. One of your stunt people get killed.
Yeah, that'd be
That would be
bad on the resume.
that would be no bueno. Massive, massive no bueno. But eventually, and I noticed this part. I'm guessing this was the part that was either re-enhanced or added back in. Well, that might be what you mentioned before, where Thex gets past the he gets out of the car and he gets to the point where he can't drive anymore, and he's on foot at this point, and he comes across the shell dwellers, as they call them, and one is just a guy and the other ones look like deformed apes or something. You can tell it's early CGI or like early 2000s CGI, but at the same time it still holds up pretty well, because and obviously Thex kills one of the shell dwellers, one of the apes, and he keeps running. And obviously we know he gets out, and the movie just stops right there in its tracks. Now, the interesting thing, I don't know if you caught this yourself or anything, or if you heard this in any of the commentary or whatever, Robert Duvall and the other two actors who are playing the other two robot cops, they're not actually climbing. They're actually in a tunnel, and they're crawling. And the interesting thing is, the final shot of the movie, it took them like 2 or 3 days, if not more, to get just the right shot on a beach of the sun starting to set. And it wasn't even Robert Duvall in the last shot. It was somebody else that was on production, and they had a bald cap on, and they came up out of from behind a hill or something, and that was the last shot of the movie and everything. And then you have the music come in and everything, and it's that really beautiful orchestral piece of music and everything that plays over the credits. And the interesting thing with the whole chase is the state itself only allots so much for somebody that's trying to escape, and if they exceed that, chase is over. That to me was another interesting thing. I mean, you're spending all this money and you're just like, well, we've reached our allotment. We have to stop.
And like obviously someone could say, oh, that is commentary on government spending. I think that was also George more so commenting on, like, say, the studio system, like before he was really facing against, like the problems of the studio system. Like he could probably see just from like when he was shadowing Francis Ford Coppola when they were making Finian's Rainbow, like how controlling the studio system is with the budget. Like, oh, this exceeds budget. We're pulling the plug on this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just kind of a funny, like, oh, the budget exceeded, we're shutting it down, like just the ridiculousness of it. And also mentioning that final shot, you can see actually a bird fly in the shot, and that was actually not planned. But they realized, let's just keep it in the movie and whatnot. They couldn't really get a better shot than that, and I think it helps a little bit because it just goes to show if there's a bird, there is some
form of life.
Yeah, there's inhabitable life or inhabitable environment for life to survive on the surface. So it gives some hope to THX. We don't know necessarily, but
what exactly happens. Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yes, degree of hope. So it's
yeah.
kind of bleak movie, but not entirely bleak.
Well, in a lot of ways, it starts out very bleak because you have a desaturation of everything. It's all white, it's all concrete, it's all just stark. But when he finally reaches the surface and he sees that sunrise, you realize, okay, maybe he's got a chance to survive up here. maybe the state was lying the whole time. So I think it does start out a very bleak movie, but it does end on a very positive and very high note, which I think is actually a good thing. So, because it kind of counterbalances, okay, maybe this guy can make a life for himself on the surface, and he may not be able to save anybody else, but he's free now.
Absolutely. Like he's escaped the anthill.
Yeah, essentially, he has. So, I will say, for a movie that was made in 1970 with some very limited edits and upgrades in terms of CGI and so on, this movie has aged extremely well. And I think, if anything else, it's gained more traction with time. It is a very solid, very entertaining, and very thought-provoking movie, which was Lucas's original intent.
Yeah, it's expanded its cult status.
It very much has. Yeah, it is one of those obscure but very cult films, but it is a cult film that has a very, so I think, I don't want to say underground, but a less recognizable fan base, or a less vocal fan base than most, but a fan base that's still, I think, very dedicated to the ideas that Lucas put into it. So,
Yeah. And I think part of it is because of obviously it's not a very like a general audience type of movie. It's a little bit more demanding because not just because it's a tone poem sort of thing, but like George said, it's kind of functions like foreign movies. Like you don't
like
necessarily
a Japanese movie, very much so. Yes,
exactly, which or even like the French New Wave cinema, because that's kind of what he's trying to evoke. He's trying to evoke like Japanese Kurosawa or even like Godard and so forth, and that makes sense because some of those movies, I mean, if you watch foreign movies, you may not like from any region of the world, you may not necessarily understand everything, but if you kind of just pay enough attention, you can kind of understand it. And this movie is much more about atmosphere, like, tone poem than it is the story. The story is there as subtext.
Yes, definitely. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. So, any further, I mean, I think we've really dug into THX and everything, and if you don't have any objection, I think we'll go ahead and move. We'll switch tone, we'll switch tenor, we'll switch to something a little more upbeat, something a little more everybody's speed. That, of course, being American Graffiti. My first exposure to this movie, I had heard of it, but I had never seen it. It was actually it was shortly after I met my birth mother back in 2011, and she had mentioned it was one of her favorite movies. Her and my birth father's one of their favorite movies. And I was like, you know what? It's by Lucas. I'm gonna give it a shot. And honestly, ever since then, I have been glad that I did, because it's from an era of history that I love, the 1960s. It's got all those great classic cars. It's got a really good cast. I mean, it's got a young Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard, Shirley Williams, of course, the great late DJ Wolfman Jack. This is a fun movie. This is just a cool, fun cruising movie with, of course, a extended cameo by one Mr. Harrison Ford. And I love this movie. So, Ace, your thoughts on? Let's jump into American Graffiti.
Well, I just want to say, you said Shirley Williams. You mean Cindy Williams?
Cindy Williams.
Yeah,
Yes,
she
Cindy
was
Williams.
on Laverne and Shirley, so I knew where you were
Cindy
coming.
Williams. Yes, I meant Cindy Williams. Sorry. Yeah,
it's all right. And
Cindy Williams.
And it also had a young Susan Summers in it briefly as the blonde in the white T-bird, I believe. I think it was Susan Summers.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. And then, of course, there's the one, oh, for heaven's sakes, the one that's hanging around with the skinny little, with Toad. The skinny little guy with the bottle cap glasses, the real thick lens glasses. this has a really solid cast all the way around, and it has some really good it has some good it's a good time. So let's jump in if you want to open up.
Oh yeah, my first exposure was once again through. I found out about the movie through Star Wars featurette on the 2004 bonus disc of the original trilogy DVDs, but I did not watch it until the following year because it was in my Uncle Tracy's VHS collection. He had the collector's edition, but I didn't get to watch it with him because I didn't know he had it. He died that year, and basically when we were going through his stuff, I basically inherited a bunch of his VHS tapes, which included Jaws, which I had already seen, and American Graffiti. It's like, oh, American Graffiti! Like I've been wanting to watch this, so I assume it had to have been one of his favorite movies because that was that era was his childhood as well. So I watched the movie. I love it. I would put it in my top 5 movies. Like it's definitely an American classic.
Definitely.
I think it was even what is it? Library of Congress registration or something like that.
Maybe, or AFI, American Film Institute.
That might be what I'm thinking.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, anyone can watch this movie. Like young people who aren't even at the age of the characters of the movie, if they're a lot younger, it's something they can watch it and enjoy themselves. Just like the fun shenanigans and whatnot. You can watch it at that age and think like, oh yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot. I am kind of nervous about leaving the nest and so forth. Or you can watch them older and think, I remember those were simpler times, and I remember being that nervous about this. And it's once again has that recurring theme of leaving home, as George Lucas has in his first 3 movies.
Yeah. Well, and this one, as you had mentioned before, he did on a dare from Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola's like, I dare you just to do a dumb comedy, and well, he did. And then he did a sequel to the dumb comedy, and as he said to Steven Spielberg, I made more American Graffiti and made a quarter.
I've never seen that one.
I have only seen like maybe 10 to 15 minutes of it. I was like, yeah, no, I can't do this. This is too depressing. Now, granted, the ending to that movie kind of counter parallels the end of THX, where THX ends on a hopeful note, and we find out at the end of American Graffiti, a couple of the characters die in Vietnam, which sucks.
Well, that was, I won't say the character, but he didn't die. He was MIA, so he's missing, presumed dead.
Yeah, but either way, still bad things happened. Missing, presumed dead, or KIA, take your pick.
Yeah, and for those wondering, like I said, I've not seen more American Graffiti, but that was not George Lucas's fault. He only produced it. Someone else directed it. And he's even... One thing I understand from that movie is he did have some involvement with like how it was shot, but that's a whole other video, I would assume.
Yeah, if we ever decide to cover it. But the American Graffiti itself, this movie itself, it's about cruise culture. It's about car culture. It's about going to the drive-in restaurant. It's about hanging out on the weekends. It's about all those things that we as dumb kids did in high school, and we did. I did. I'm gonna imagine Ace, you did, and granted, the drive-in restaurant didn't really exist in the 90s for you and me anyway. So we didn't really have a Sonic wasn't a thing yet. So at least not Sonic where I grew up. Really?
It was where I grew up. Sonic's been around for...
Well, honey, different parts of the state. Obviously. But the hijinks and the shenanigans that these characters get into, you've got Richard Dreyfuss's character who's chasing after this gorgeous woman that he sees in this white T-Bird convertible. And I gotta admit, the cars in this movie, oh my gosh, I love these cars.
Beautiful cars. Beautiful
Oh
cars.
my gosh. Yeah. Those were, I saw those cars and I was like, I want it. I want that one too. I want that one too. And I want that one too. I
Back
have
when
to
they
say,
were,
back when cars were cars and they were works of art and they were beautiful and they were
yeah.
turquoise and white and they had fins and you had street rods like uh for heaven's sakes, I think his name is John, the one that ends up cruising around all night with the teenage
Milner.
kid, the t-
Yeah.
Milner, John Milner. You hear anything? His yellow street rod that Will Harrison Ford's character refers to as piss yellow.
And puke green.
And oh my gosh, young Harrison Ford in this movie. Oh my gosh. He had such a nasally voice. So
Him
damn
trying to put on
nasally.
him trying to put on a hick accent. And I think it was just for that one scene. You'll really hear that accent the rest of the movie. He's like, "Hey, sorry if I scared you." Or something. But those cars, he had beautiful cars when there was craftsmanship, when cars had style, and now everything's just too aerodynamic and gray and ugly. My car as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. I mean, you got to remember too, Lucas grew up with those types of cars. He loves those types of cars. I think he has a pretty nice collection, even still to this day. He has a pretty nice car collection. You can't tell me he got rid of his cars. He may have sold Lucasfilm, but he did not get rid of his cars.
I would assume not. I would wonder who, how does his car collection compare to say Jay Leno's?
I'd say it's probably pretty good both ways. I think they both
Yeah.
have some pretty nice ones.
And I wonder, like, because once again, Milner's car, the yellow one, obviously has the THX,
street rod.
The THX license plate. It has an exposed engine. Obviously, like poetry, it rhymes. We see the yellow vehicle reoccur in Phantom Menace as the Naboo Starfighter. We see the exposed engine yellow hot rod is the speeder Anakin uses in Attack of the Clones with the bounty hunter chase. And Anakin's own Jedi Starfighter in Revenge of the Sith is yellow as well. So it makes me wonder: was yellow like was that George's car color back when he?
Maybe it was.
a kid as well?
Maybe it was.
Makes me wonder.
It could have been. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and apparently, like one thing that part of the reason he got out of mechanics and racing, for those of you who are curious on like, oh, how do you go from racing to being a director, is he actually was racing at one day and he actually had a very bad accident that just totaled the car, and somehow he was able to walk away from it. Like it was in theory a crash no one could survive. So he was kind of just in a daze about it. Like he was in the hospital. I think they were just checking him out. And he was just kind of like, just had an epiphany of, I got to do something else with my life.
Yeah, really.
And
well, it kind of harkens to the big race at the end of the movie between Milner and Harrison Ford's character,
Bob Falfa.
and Alfalfa.
Bob Falfa.
Bob Falfa. Yeah, Bob Falfa. Bob Falfa. Boba Fett? Nah.
I don't know. You just I'm questioning. Now I'm questioning.
Bob Falfa, Boba Fett.
Oh, I'd never even thought of that. You might be onto something there.
Bob Falfa the precursor for Boba Fett?
Maybe in the name portion.
Maybe at least in name and name only. Maybe.
And if you think about it, Milner is also kind of a precursor to Han Solo in a way, and Falfa is his nemesis in the movie. So
I see where you're going. I see where you're going. I can dig it. Yep, I can dig it. But I mean, on the surface, this movie is as basic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, as you can get. It's a cruise movie. It's a hangout movie. It's the type of movie you sit around and you watch with your buds or your best girl, and
or your grandma if she grew up in that era.
That's true too, or even your mom or your parents even. Like, hey, did y'all do this? Did y'all go out and get and make out and lose your car and your car got stolen?
Did you moon passerbys from your car?
Did you get suckered into babysitting some girl's younger sister, and end up doing all sorts of crazy hijinks and vandalizing a car?
Did you ask someone to buy alcohol for you and they got it for you, but it turns out they robbed the store? That was the funniest part of the movie.
Poor old Toad. Toad's. I will say Toad's side story in this movie. He gets this really cute, hot, I would assume somewhat older woman, and she's like, I want some brew. And he's like, okay, I will get some brew. And he finally gets the brew. And he's like, we got to go now. We got to run. We got to hide. And we got to get drunk so I can make out with you.
Yeah, just that image of like the guy's like, "Bye, Babos, yeah, you lost your ID," and he's like, "Oh, cool, sure, here." And he's like, "Yeah, we're all set." Guy runs out the store, just tosses him the bottle. He's like, barely catches it. Other guy runs out, shoots at the guy and just ran out the door. The first time I saw it, I don't think I laughed harder than watching that movie.
And then poor Richard Dreyfuss's character, he accidentally, by no fault of his own, sits on the car of the local gangs, the gang leader's car, and he doesn't mean to, and he ends up doing everybody a huge favor because he gets the one jerk cop in that town, and he nails him. He nails him good and everything. Holstead, I think, is the cop's name, and that guy was a real piece of crap. I mean, Milner was not doing a damn thing wrong. Hold on one second.
That's fine.
Okay, there we go.
Oh.
I have to be the cop. The cat's being Milner right now.
It's all good.
Anyway, but when Richard Dreyfuss's character hooks that wire and that hook to the bottom of the car, I'm like, oh yeah, do it. Please do it. This guy gives all cops a bad name. I hate this guy. And they do it, and and him and his partner look behind him, and they realize the entire back axle and everything else of their car is completely ripped out, and they're like, well, we just screwed up.
Well, give cops a bad name. Well, West Coast cop. So he was like Strickland from Back to the Future. Not necessarily a bad guy, but just a hard ass for no real good reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a major hard ass.
I mean, he gave Milner a ticket because his license plate light was out. Oh yeah, that's something that warrants a ticket or whatever.
I had that happen to me. The cop let me off with a warning. I was like, honestly, officer, I didn't even know it was out. He's like, I'm gonna let you off with a warning. I was like, I will get it fixed tomorrow, and I did. He wasn't a jerk about it. He wasn't rude about it or anything, and he gave me a pass. So, and I did get it fixed. And it cost me like 85 cents. Took me 5 minutes to fix it.
And what's funny is the whole rip the back axle off with the wire. I believe they actually tested that on Mythbusters, and they busted. They said that would never actually work. I think they said even if you're using an older model car, it would not work because of just like how it's built, and it's built to not have that happen and so forth. So they had to do. I know it's still funny to see in the movie, but just to think that that wouldn't work, because there was probably some kids that tried doing that after they saw it and they found out it didn't work.
Now, Mythbusters isn't always right, but still, yeah, I get you. Another part of this movie that I absolutely love is when Ron Howard's character and Cindy Williams' character, they go back to the sock hop, and I'm like, Oh my gosh, an actual a sock hop with the girls in their poodle skirts with the crinoline and they're actually not wearing shoes. And I think it's um Ron Howard's character and Cindy Williams' character are staying there dancing and they're dancing too close. And one of the chaperones comes up to him and he's like, y'all need to split it up. And Ron Howard's character goes, why don't you go hump a duck or something to that
Kiss the
effect?
duck.
Kiss a duck or something. And he's like, what'd you say? He's like, go kiss a duck. He's like, he's like, you're gonna be in detention. He's like, dude, I graduated a couple months ago. And I won't lie, if there had been a teacher I really disliked, I knew they were going to be at a dance and I had already graduated or whatever, I would have done the same damn thing. I mean, I would have done the same damn thing. I've been like, kiss my hairy asshole. What did you say? I said, kiss my hairy asshole. You're going to detention tomorrow. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm graduated. Kiss my hairy asshole, and I'd leave.
Yeah, there was a couple teachers that wanted to say words like that too. I remember once in a store seeing, I think, a middle school English teacher who was just a mean old cantankerous twat. And she had the resting bee face. So
resting bitch.
I mean, this was her neutral expression. And but anyway, what was I? And something about the sock hop. Like, I'm not someone that would do dance, but you gotta admit this. I think anyone can admit this movie has a great catalog of songs, even if they're not really oldies.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is a soundtrack you definitely should pick up.
Mm-hmm. And some. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's all I was gonna say. This is a soundtrack you need to pick up. Most definitely.
I bought the soundtrack, and it's filled with the majority of the songs in movies, except maybe one or two. But one of them is just a song that you kind of forget about, and the other one is Harrison Ford trying to sing in the car to Cindy Williams briefly for a few seconds, and she's awkwardly like, "Get to the other side of the car, away from him," and most of it is obviously existing songs at that time, but they did have one band playing a few songs, like they did Louie Louie and At the Hop and so forth. And there was Flash and the Continental Kids, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So their songs, their songs are featured on there.
Yeah. And, for people our age, in the 90s, when I was in high school, did we ever have a sock hop or two? Yes, I will admit we did. And yes, we actually did dress like they would have dressed back then. And it was actually fun. I won't lie. It was. Because I actually, I asked Mother Ambassador, I was like, okay, Mom, I'm going to the sock hop. What do I need to wear and how do I need to alter my clothes so that I look appropriate? She's like, oh, okay. She's like, I'll help you. Sure, no problem. And she rolled up my shirts. She's like, roll up your shirts. Well, she's like, are you wearing a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt? I was like, well, probably wear a short sleeve t-shirt. She's like, okay, you need to roll your sleeves up. She's like, well, you don't smoke. I'm like, yeah, I don't smoke. But I was like, what's the deal? She's like, well, some guys would have a pack of cigarettes like John Milner did tucked in his shirt sleeve. I was like, well, nobody's going to notice. What if I got a box of candy cigarettes? She's like, that'd work. And then she's like, you need either white or black socks. You need a pair of, she's like, more than likely guys would wear dress shoes to this, even though they're going to be in their socks anyway. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, I'll just wear. And she's like, you need a pair of jeans, but you need to roll the jeans at the bottom. I'm like, and tuck them. I'm like, okay. I went to the sock hop and I had fun.
Good for you, man. I thought to myself when I first saw it, I thought, why'd they take their shoes off? And then it kind of dawned on me like, well, actually, it might make it easier for them to dance. Like it didn't dawn on me.
Not only that, they're in a gym, so they don't mess up the parquet floor.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that. I just assumed if the chicks were wearing heels, it'd be easy for them to move, and the guys just did it because because it was easy for them to
No,
move it
because
out.
the guys and girls both had no shoes on.
Makes it easier for them to move around and whatnot.
And the other funny thing is at the sock hop, while Howard and Williams are inside dancing, Richard Dreyfuss's character is outside talking to one of their professors or whatever, and he runs and he's talking to one of the teachers, not the professor, one of the teachers. And the teacher ended up leaving college and coming back to teach at their high school because he's just like, this felt like home to me. He's like, I want to come back home. And it kind of incentivized him further to eventually leave home and become a writer and everything. Because at the end of the movie, we find out his character was, in fact, went on to become a very well-known writer.
In Canada.
So, yeah, in Canada, but still, hey.
Yeah,
A writer's a writer.
I'm just throwing that out there because it said, "Oh, he's a writer in Canada." I can't remember if it said where in Canada. It just said living in Canada. I thought, "Oh, okay, cool." And
yeah, so hey, he got out, and Ron Howard's character ended up being an insurance salesman
in Modesto, which is where George Lucas grew up.
Yep,
it was the valley, much like in the movie.
Yep, exactly. So, but for those of you that watch this, I hope. If you've never seen American Graffiti, me and Ace have given you some incentive to check it out because this is somewhat of a spoiler-free, but also spoiler-ish review because you can't talk about the movie without actually talking about the movie. You can't allude to things. But if you have seen this movie, let us know in the comments. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you just find it to be kind of campy and cheesy? And if that's the case, cool. But anything else you want to discuss, Ace, on American Graffiti?
Well, just kind of some points that I understand from what George Lucas had kind of mentioned, like how the characters, with the exception of Steve, like Toad, John, and Kurt, all kind of mirror different stages in his life. Toad is kind of his awkward teen years when he's kind of very nerdy in like early high school, and then Milner the racer is who he was in late school, junior college, up until George had his accident, and then Kurt is when he's basically leaving and going into the world and learning more. And I can kind of relate to that because when I was in middle school, I was definitely more of the nerdy kid. I was the Star Wars kid and whatnot. High school, I became more rebellious. I was the metalhead and whatnot. I hung out with the nerds and the goths and whatnot. And then, after that, I just kind of like it became a little bit more balanced to an extent. I wouldn't say a verbatim like Kurt, but like I get each character better now because I had an aspect of that in my life. And yeah, I just love them because everyone's cruised around with their friends. Maybe they didn't do it exactly like in the movie where they're just going down small streets and talking to other people in the cars, but everyone's like piled up in one of their friends' cars and just kind of drove aimlessly to the other side of town just as something to do. I can think of that time. Like, yeah, I remember doing that with my friends. Good times. I kind of miss that time, and because no one does that anymore, at least in friend groups, sadly, because we're kind of all too old, whose schedules are conflicting and whatnot, so there's no time for that. And what else? And it's just kind of interesting how George also did. It wasn't just to like make a comedy. He also thought from his anthropology experience, like what he partly studied before he got into film school, like how the movie was based. He shot it like a documentary to kind of as a recording to basically something that happened because it was a very unique American experience that kind of gone out of fashion with the hippie culture and so forth. He thought, what, I'm just going to have this as a time capsule piece, essentially. And it's a great time capsule piece. It's an American classic, and I would definitely say important to our culture.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I mean, it's a picture of, for those of us that are Gen X or maybe millennial, of the world that our parents, maybe even our grandparents grew up in, and gives us a picture of what they might have been. Maybe not exactly, but maybe gives us a snapshot of what they may have been like. in their younger years, in their teen years, and so on. And for me, it's a movie that I'm very grateful my birth mother introduced me to. Granted, I've always been a Star Wars fan, and I had heard in passing about American Graffiti, but I'd never seen it. I'm glad that she incentivized me to eventually see it, and now I have added to our movie collection, or rather extensive movie collection, and it is definitely one that I will revisit. So, but with that, all that said, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you all enjoyed the review with me and Ace and everything. Make sure you leave your comments down below on either THX or American Graffiti. Let us know what you thought of it, if you've ever seen it, if you've never seen it. Will this incentivize you to go give it a watch? And I would highly recommend you do so. Do want to let you all know we will be back. I will be back again with another review and everything. Me and Ace and our good friend Mr. Zach Leary will be doing continuing our Quentin Tarantino review series. Next up is Jackie Brown, so be sure to keep an eye out for that when that uploads. And also make sure to follow me on my social media accounts, both on X and Instagram. So, but all that being said, you all have a great day wherever you're at. Remember, always stay ambassadorial. And until next time, these are the ambassadors. Signing off.
Peace.